Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. It's a weekly podcast where two nerds have a chat. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
This week we're talking about dealing with feedback. What was it?
Handling feedback.
Handling.
Honestly,
one word.
If you can't remember what the topic of the episode is,
No, I was trying to
Michael.
remember the wording. Because I was like, I'm looking at the thumbnail, I'm like, it's two words, but I can't remember what the first word was anymore. Handling feedback. That's what it says on the thumbnail that you basically never see. Only you see it on YouTube because Apple Podcasts don't show it. Yeah, we're going to talk about handling feedback because, we're in terms of clients getting reviewed, users, life, people telling you stuff, usually criticism. Like, we're going to talk about that sort of thing.
Also, things like praise. Praise comes into feedback, which could also be very uncomfortable, she says, always bringing in the positive. Different people, I think sources of feedback can be, some are easier to dismiss, some are more accurate and therefore harder to ignore. That kind of things.
Yes. So if you ever make anything where you have to show it to someone and they judge it, you've come to the right place if you want to hear people complaining about that sort of thing. I mean, discussing. So let's play the music. Ivanka, how's it going?
I have made some progress on my citizenship paperwork, but it's not solved. So we won't talk about that. I will tell you that my 4-year-old woke up this morning and said, "Mummy, I dreamt I parked the van." I was like, wow. And then because I could park the van, I parked a machine that went all the way into space.
Right.
So obviously she was acquiring skills in her sleep. So she first parked a van and then she parked a spaceship.
But in space?
No, I think it was on Earth.
So,
but her friend Joey, he didn't know how to park the spaceship, so she had to do it.
Right. So, but she found a space. Okay, well that's good. It's nice. Nice.
So
good skills to have.
I enjoyed that. I also was standing. My mother's visiting. One more story. My mother's visiting, and I was like, with the three of us were in the kitchen, dining, living area, and I was going, I do like this kitchen. So my daughter pipes up, "And why is that, Mummy?" And then I started answering and she just totally blanked me. It's just like, I'm just making conversation. I don't really care what you think about that.
Lovely.
Thanks. All right, so there you go. That's my day.
Excellent.
Whatever.
Family life. I get the videos on my WhatsApp of the babies, the children. My sort of 9-month-year-old nephew was discovering himself in the mirror yesterday. It's very fascinating. He was trying to give it a kiss, trying to give himself a kiss, and making lots of baby noises in the process. But yes,
we all love.
For me,
how are you?
For me, I am warm still, even though it's actually kind of like it's twice. Well, if you think Celsius is a scale that starts at 0, it's like 14 degrees outside, but it's still like 29, 30 in my room because apparently air cannot travel through this building in any way. So it just slowly heats up and then just gets... It's 29 in here. I've had the fans going, all the doors open, all the windows open all day. It's just hopeless.
But it's 14 outside.
It's like 14, 15 outside. But it's bright.
Wow.
But it's just like this room is just the worst. But, I got more upset about that last year when I was paying a lot more money and they had a quote, air conditioning system, which was just a disaster, if you ask me. Like, the guy who owned the building had installed it, but, I mean... there was just this tangle of these big pipes going to God knows where that the technical person was trying to sort of debug, but like no labels on anything. So like, how are you supposed to fix something that it was like classic kind of hacker mentality, but in an air conditioning installation? So it's this entire like loft room just full of these sort of silver pipes going God knows where. The only way to find out was to like take it off and go into the room and sort of feel at the vent and see if that was the one. And then the guy that was working on it, I was like, maybe you should like label them now this time. I was like, couldn't be bothered. Like, this is why shit doesn't work. People just don't label things, or just put a number on it, get some coloured dots and stick them on. But anyway, here it's half the price, so I don't expect air conditioning. I've been being a programmer this week, and it's been head scratching. But today I actually got a lot of momentum, and maybe I'll have an app in time for Apple. Maybe I will.
Wait.
But also,
when's that? What's the deadline?
I don't. It's unnown. You know, it's like one of those things. It's like, when is the iPhone 11 coming out? Like, no one knows yet. So there's that. But I did upgrade my Mac to the beta thing yesterday, thinking, oh, well, iOS has been pretty stable, and it broke Chrome and like anything that has that sort of Chrome engine in it, which is Slack, WhatsApp, GitHub Desktop, Visual Studio Code. All of those apps just don't work on this thing. Luckily, I don't especially need them all right now, and there's ways around it, but it's like, come on, like, why have you just broken? Like, I use Chrome for everything all the time, every day. It's really annoying. Anyway, that's me, so let's keep it short. This week I got some feedback on something I'd worked very hard on that I did not appreciate. And it made me very cross for at least 24 hours. I'm still a bit cross when I think about it.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit difficult talking about something in such abstract terms, but it's like Michael in particular has thought about some creative ways of telling the story, and then the guy just wants to do things the same old way that he's been doing it.
Yeah.
And it's
a time-old story, isn't it? It's like something you come up against all the time. And I think part of it is, if you don't do a perfect job, then people's instinct is to try and fix it for you or help you fix it. But when they don't realise what's gone into it, they can be very heavy-handed with it, or their suggestions can seem very
I think it goes. I've had this sort of. I've been involved in a Twitter thread about this before now, but it's like, it's this thing of, we are agreed you want to get your story out, so let's agree that that's the objective, but we can't agree that we're going to get your story out and this is how we're going to do it, because if you were able to get your story out, you would have already done that.
Yeah.
But you can't. This is where we're going to help. So, you know, it's like it's that age old. We've all worked with people. You and I in particular work with people that want to tell you what they want and how you are to achieve it.
Yeah. So
and that's the thing. It's like, don't worry about the fact that the you know, unless it's like you said in your response, it's like, unless it's factually and blatantly incorrect, doesn't matter that it doesn't say everything.
Yeah.
It's like that, you know, and it's like,
not the idea.
But I think that's a very specific. You know, in that instance, it's a very specific scenario. I think people,
I think I can generalize it too, because I was looking at videos to say like how to handle client feedback, and like I found a few that, and like a common one is like how to deal with client feedback. Like, can you make the logo bigger? Like, this is something that clients come in, like, you've designed a website, like, we can make this more general. Like, they come in and say, can you make the logo bigger? And you can't just go yes, because that'll mess up the entire layout, and you have to somehow decode what the actual problem is, because people will come to you with their explanation. If they see that it's not quite perfect or not quite what they imagined, they will go, oh well, the logo's not big enough. But then it's like, no, and then the sort of response to that is supposed to be, okay, well, I think the underlying problem is you feel your brand isn't coming across, and then explain that it's not just your logo that expresses your brand. It's the tone of voice, it's the content, it's all of the things going on in a web page. It goes far beyond just like how big people, like the logo doesn't need to be bigger, and that causes lots of knock-on effects if you kind of change one thing. And what people don't realize is that when you're doing something when you're putting something together, when you're telling a story, when you're constructing something like this, you can't just change one thing and expect it to still be good, expect it to still have a sort of holistic, like hang together as a whole.
There's something about as well, people, you show somebody something you've made and they don't really know what to say, but feel they should say something. Because actually the first time somebody sees something, it's like, you know, like some people aren't comfortable with their first impressions. I've worked with clients who are like, I am afraid that I will see something good and I won't know that it's good because I don't have the skills to judge it. And that's another part of the feedback. And so depending on how aware they are of themselves, they might just go in for the attack just to see if you can defend your idea.
Yeah.
I've worked with people like that. It's like, right, my job as a client is to break down attack everything you've shown me to see how well you defend it, and then I'll go, brilliant, I love it. But because that's what they want to, that's their idea of testing your resolve or something, some macho nonsense. I think that's part of that as well. And I think but the understanding what they're really objecting to can be very difficult. Like, you know, like, I just don't like it. You're allowed to say that.
Yeah.
You know, a person receiving a thing is allowed to say, yeah, I don't really know why, but I just don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, people don't have the language to talk about these things. Like, when we're the expert in something, but we're trying to sell that thing or do that thing for someone else, or like a lot of these problems, like I think like when something is just, when you just nail something,
yeah,
it's you don't quite have the same problem because there's enough for people to love. But if there are little kind of like rough ends or it's not quite right yet, that's when people, they can tell intuitively that there's something they don't like about it, but they have no language. I know this is what we said, isn't it? So it's like being able to recognize that something's good, but it's also having the language to know what's not right about it beyond just saying, I'm not sure about it. Because we hate that feedback as well. It's just not quite right. Okay.
I'm always much more comfortable sharing incomplete work. The thing where it sometimes falls over. So if you're showing somebody so recent example is, you know, a big piece of brown paper with, you know, 8 post-it notes, each representing a different mobile screen, hand drawn with like notes underneath, very scrappy.
Yeah.
And then so we're discussing the flow of it. Yeah. And we're all agreed, yeah, this is a great flow and the concept of what this thing might be. And then you do the next level of detail. It's like, oh, yeah, but I didn't think you'd have to log in. It's like, well, so, you know, like, so the sort of the vagueness can be really useful to get people on board with the big idea before you drill into the detail. And maybe, like in the example of your script, maybe a storyboard, you know, a visual storyboard might have, but then that, you know, again, it's work you're doing voluntarily. So there's also steps that shouldn't be necessary sometimes. It's like,
well, it's a
that's
step
how it
I
feels
certainly
to
wouldn't
me
have had.
sometimes. You're like, well,
yeah, like in that case, I certainly wouldn't have had time to do a whole storyboarding process. And also, I was like, working alone, I need some level of autonomy just to, like, a script is good for me. Actually, a script is kind of like me being thorough because at least I've written it all out in advance and you can read through it and see what the thing is. Storyboarding is going to add a lot of time to the process that I haven't got time for. So I'm going to do little sketches and I'm going to sort of like look at things, but I'm going to have to figure out what I can do as I go along. Like in this case, it was like, I'm learning some 3D software and like, what am I actually going to be able to do? Am I going to be able to have faces that have expressions? Surprisingly difficult. And still, like, I haven't really got the timing of those right in the draft. And you just don't even know how annoying it is to do that stuff in Blender. I've come up with problems where you make something look too finished too early. And I always thought, like, if we're working with prototypes, like even digitally, even though it'd probably be easier to just use some sort of frame library that automatically makes things look okay, it's probably better to use some sort of special thing that makes all the lines look rough and all the kind of text look sort of like hand drawn, so that people kind of know how to look. Yeah, this is something we talked about Canonical, but I think like people, the form kind of dictates how people should approach it.
I find it sometimes difficult though when you're showing. Sometimes you're showing. I, for example, have shown things not quite done in order to get feedback on a particular topic. But the way the feedback is delivered is though I don't know that it's not quite done. And it's like, yeah, I'm not showing you this because I'm daft. That I don't know how to do it. I'm showing it you because actually there's a valuable bit of feedback I need, or I need some direction because I'm doing something that I'm not the expert in, or you're the main decision maker. So I can't actually, much as I love to set strategy and do things and be right, sometimes I have to do things that other people think are right.
Yeah. And asking them,
they might be wrong, but
and asking them for their bit. Yeah. In a way that they don't just kind of get carried away and want to kind of like do your job for you in a really clumsy way. Like, asking them, I just need these 6 bits of domain knowledge that of your expertise, your unique expertise. And and I really think I think I've been relatively, like when I look at sort of graphic designers and people like that, I see the problems they have compared to just a developer kind of like implementing stuff. I'm like creative in that space, but because it is so opaque to most people, they wouldn't attempt to tell me to structure my code differently. But everyone thinks they can write. Everyone thinks that they could know what color looks better. Everyone thinks that they know how to like put something on a page, and they just really don't understand how deep that craft goes. I'm not a graphic designer. I'd never describe myself as that, but obviously I dabble. But one thing I always benefit from sitting down with Marcus or somebody going, here's this thing that I've designed. And he goes, well, why don't you just make that font 2 points bigger and move that there? And you're like, oh, okay. No, that's why you get paid the big bucks for the design. It's like, what I've done is fine, but the 30 odd years or whatever he's got of experience are just like ding, ding, ding. And it's like, it took him 20-minute chat with me to improve my visual design immensely. But he spent years getting to that point. So it's that David Thorne thing where he's like, it won't take me long to make that change, but you've got to also account for the several years at design school and all of the professional experience. That's part of that equation. You can't just say, it's easy for me, so I should do it quickly. And we've talked about that. You talked about your electronics guy, didn't you, who just would do repairs quickly and not charge enough.
Exactly. But so it's kind of but then talking about getting feedback, somebody like Marcus, who's a graphic designer, he's a brand designer that we've both worked with, he is incredibly good at giving you feedback without making you feel like a numpty, I think.
So I think what that is, interestingly, is the way an expert can give you feedback on things versus the way an amateur will try and give you feedback on things. And so something that's made me...
by the way, I'm not sure it's amateur and professional.
Okay.
I think it's...
Is there a better dichotomy?
Well, no, I think personally, I think it's more to do with your sort of arrogance levels, or your not even at your sort of it's like I was thinking about this the other day, even though I didn't know this was the podcast we're going to be recording. There's a guy, some head of design somewhere, who was boasting that in his office walls they got this big new poster that says "Don't be a dick." I'm like, why do you need that poster? What the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you do that? Why would you be a dick? You're a professional designer. The other people in your company, I assume, are professionals. Why do you need to be reminded to be respectful of other people?
Do you know that reminds me of this huge banner on one of the developments around here that says "Homes, because homes matter," and it's like, who the thinks homes don't matter. It just like belies that there is a belief that living doesn't matter. Like some people that you're connected with think that homes don't matter. Like,
but they do.
Oh, you're so, you know, it's just such a sort of superficially it seems like a positive thing, but really, like you're saying, like belies an underlying existence of a terrible belief system that you would hope didn't exist.
They probably even don't think, like somebody like Marcus is like all about developing other people. His whole personality, everything. He's a teacher, really, in the truest sense of the word, and that's how he approaches things. Doesn't matter what you're talking about, frankly, running or drawing or whatever. And then there's other people like, I am so important. I know what I'm talking about. You know, and it's like and Marcus will tell me something's rubbish. It's not like he'll go, oh, that's nice, but he can make it better. He'll go, did you lose your glasses or something? What's wrong with you?
And that's something I recently realised is it's okay if you're kind of being, you know, if you've got something to add, you know, if you can explain why, I think people can accept that.
Yeah, it's like, thank you, but no. No, I don't like it when... Nick and I do this on the cooking front, because he'll often eat something. Oh, this is the best thing you've ever cooked. I'll go on. You know, where's the list? You often say that, and then he'll go, I think this is in my top 3 worst things you've ever made. I'm like, I don't appreciate that. He goes, but do you want me to lie to you? Yes, I do.
Yes,
in this instance, please, whilst we're eating dinner, just go, delicious.
Yeah, you got to know when, when it's appropriate. It's like that advice of, like, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about, is this going to benefit the person or not? Like, knowing this, is this going to benefit me? Yeah. Like, you making me feel bad about this dinner. Am I going to improve as a result of feeling, I don't know, probably not. Like, I'm just going to, you don't want to shut people down.
Well, I will say that I have not included purple cabbage in a stew since then.
Well, that's a shame.
because the problem was, it made everything go purple, and this was the mistake. I was being lazy, and instead of putting it in at the end, I just anyway. That was the problem. So I learnt from that, but it tasted fine. You just couldn't look at it. Going back to your amateur versus professional, where that is true, I think, is to do with the skills and language.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at,
that,
really.
And that's the point. It's like I can go, well, the way, I can give you grammatical feedback, or I can tell you that, the fonts, you've chosen the wrong font, or I don't know. These are all, I can't, I don't know.
There's levels. There's like, here, I'll just fix it for you, and you're like, oh, you just did a magic trick and I'm confused. Which is one level of it, but then the next level, I'm like, why? But why? Why does that work? Like, and then that's when you sort of really have to. But that's something that you can't really expect someone giving you feedback to kind of educate you about the whole, how design works or whatever that is. But yeah, like I was gonna sort of move things. I saw a good video on YouTube by this guy. He's a guy that's a YouTuber, but is also actually a proper film director. Like he's directed some Hollywood films. Well, he did. Some dodgy work. He did Shazam, so that was quite a big one this year. And he just did a little YouTube video this year, talking about just what you're doing as a filmmaker is you're solving problems and you're kind of dealing with things that happen day to day. And I'm talking about this, and what I found this was interesting in relation to like reviews and analysis and how people talk about your work. So when you sort of come to read, and I think this is like ridiculous in music writing. I think like what is written about music is so fundamentally divorced from what actually went into creating the music, like 99% of the time. I don't know if you've ever picked up The Wire magazine. It's like a really dry, small font, but it's what all the kind of noise musicians, experimental artists want to get into. But it is absolute, densely written, completely made up nonsense about this music. It's like, no, they just, because when you know the technical craft behind something and you sort of see someone like just testiculating, as my father would say, about what went into it. Yeah,
Love
like,
it.
You just think like, what the hell was talking bollocks while waving your hands about?
I love it.
You got one. It's like, I think my dad's jokes sometimes are good, but he just makes me not want to laugh at it in his delivery of it. So sorry about that. Maybe it's just the relationship. So you enjoyed that. You've got, yeah, it's your
I
friends.
did.
Funny. But anyway, what I was going to say, like about this guy David F. Sandberg. He's talking about like it's about problem solving every day, and so there's this scene where like there's 3 of the kids kind of are outside the house, and there's one back in the house putting on her shoes, and then and then he talks about like the reason they had to put in that scene of one of them putting on her shoes was because that actor wasn't available for another few days because she was finishing another project, so couldn't be available for that outdoor shot. So they had to like figure out on the day, okay, well we'll have her like being slow to put on her shoes, and then they've got this shot another day of her kind of putting on the shoes, and then of course it's like. And then he sort of points out, and then of course in the final bloody shot she's got like Velcro shoes. So if you look at it, it doesn't even make any sense that she would be slow to put those on. But then you sort of sometimes see these discussions online where people just sort of start to sort of read into all of those little things like, that means that this character is a little bit slow. Maybe over the course of the film, like the reason that she got the superpower of being super fast was because earlier in the film she was super, slow at putting the shoes on. And he's like, no, that sounds about right. But I think it just like really highlights the how divorced people's understanding of things are from the process that goes into creating it. Like most of the time.
The thing is, we like to talk about things. If people like to, that sort of, the reason people like to explain things and understand things. And even in school, what it made me think of was that thing that you had to do in literature classes, which is, and what was the writer trying to say with that sentence? And you're like, I don't know. They were just trying to say that she got a pretty dress on. I was like, but it's like, we're kind of taught to, if you are taught to analyse or question, but then you apply those to things you don't really, and some things are just meant to be enjoyed, aren't they? It's like art, going to see paintings. There is a point of, or music falls into this as well. Did I like it? And if I liked it, great. If I didn't like it, well, that doesn't mean it's bad. I think.
Yeah, so it's like, why? It comes back to that bloody Game of Thrones saturation of people complaining about the last season of Game of Thrones. Like, just why do you need to? Why do you need everyone to know that you didn't like something? Like, why is that so important to you?
I don't know that, and I think it's like we have a rule. We have a few rules with the child. One of them is. She doesn't have to eat anything she doesn't like, but she's not allowed to go, ugh, disgusting. Or one of her first Croatian, she come back from nursery going, fuj, fuj. I'm like, I don't care if you're saying it in Croatian now, you still can't say that it's black. Because, just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not food, and it doesn't mean it's not nice. So and I think that's, could be applied to many things. It's like, I don't like what you're wearing. I wouldn't wear what you're wearing. Doesn't mean that what you're wearing is disgusting.
Yeah. What that does make hard is like, I pay for some promoters to send my album out to a big mailing list and then get like fuck all responses. You just sort of assume that it's because nobody liked it and didn't want to say anything bad about it. And like over the years I've sent CDs to so many different people and just not heard anything back, that you just assume that they hated it kind of thing, or that they didn't have anything good to say about it. And like I don't like that kind of void of like not getting anything back when you do ask for it.
But going back to my purple stew.
Yes.
Or black stew, which is what it was. Is that all vegetables are the same colour? We did get to the bottom of what was wrong with it.
Yeah.
Or it's like with the food, if the child doesn't like, it's like she doesn't like banana and avocado, and she doesn't like the texture. so she won't eat them, and that's fine. But it's because it's squishy.
Yeah, I can.
Fair enough. It's because it's squishy, or it's too salty, it's too sweet, or I don't know. This crust on this bread is too hard. I don't like it. Fine. Yeah. But you just go is, I don't think, and we've been doing on Restaurants Brighton jobs. So I'd like to interrupt this podcast to plug my product. No, so on Restaurants Brighton jobs, we've been doing lots of interviews with industry people, particularly in Brighton, obviously, and they're all asked, if there's one thing in your industry, what would you change? And one of them said TripAdvisor,
right?
Because he's like, if you are in a restaurant and something is not to your liking, and you tell us, we can address it.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you just store it up and go and have a rant on TripAdvisor. That's and apparently many of them apparently are very personal. And I've heard an interview with somebody talking about this before. So it will go, that girl had too much red lipstick on, or it will be a personal attack on a member of staff. There's nothing constructive in those. There's just some sort of like sense of power. I think it's the same behaviour as the client who's forcing you to defend your design idea. That sort of aggressive, come and prove that you've thought every little bit through, and then at the very end, when you're nearly in tears, I'm going to tell you that actually it was okay and I liked it. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that's the same personality trait of just being a dick.
Well, we're in this world now where everyone gets to have an opinion about everything in public, and it used to be that you'd have to sit down and write a letter to the person and say whether you liked it. I've heard authors talking about it was nice because you get a letter. Sometimes it'd be someone not liking it, but most of the time it was like a thoughtful letter from someone that liked your work. Now you just get Twitter and people being just awful and just saying awful things to you sort of all day long, and it's just, so you just have to turn it off.
But I think lends itself very nicely to the other side of it, because in that also comes praise.
Yes.
And that sometimes feels really creepy and you don't know how to respond. It's like it is hard to respond. It's just I don't know. I'm thinking praise? About I've used the word creepy, and now I regret using the word creepy. So that can stay in the podcast. But I regret using the word creepy because actually none of these things have creeped me out. But when you read a positive review, like some of the reviews for our podcast that some of you have been kind enough to take the time to write, it's that's some of you. Bar saying thank you, and then that doesn't feel sufficient. And so there's that sort of slightly blushy, oh, that's really nice, somebody said really something nice, and then you go, thank you, that's nice, and then that feels like a ineloquent response to some eloquent praise. It's like
when I was a kid, when I was 6, 7 at school, I remember the nuns, one of the nuns talking in my school report, it said he likes praise. He sort of thrives on praise, I think was something. And there's always a weird word to hear from a nun in the first place. But I find, but now I kind of I guess it was what was fueling me in my, brokenness for a long time, was as long as I could get these little kind of nuggets of approval every day, then that was something to sort of keep me going. But now praise is it's just I switch off. I can't hear it.
Well, but you see, I don't want it to sound like I don't like praise. That's not true. I need all the praise. I always want to be top of the class, and I want all the praise. So don't let this put you off. But I find that So, and I, like you, at school and in life, I thrive. If somebody said, it's like my electric bike, it's a great analogy. I was just trying to describe it to Nick. For the same effort, I go much faster. So I I actually put more effort in than I do on my non-electric bike.
Right.
Because it's like the bike praised me for doing something. And I'm like, wait till you see this. It's like, so why travel at 20 kilometres an hour when you can travel at 30 kilometres an hour? Whereas normally if I was on my bicycle, I'd be at 12 kilometres an hour because I'm not really a speed freak. But I'm like, that sort of positive praise really has a very positive effect on me. But I think over the years, and certainly while working at Canonical, working in open source, we got so much criticism, public criticism, that I was like, at some point, right, if I'm going to tell everybody, like, look, we must just continue doing our job the best we can. There's not, we can't do anything about it. In that context, you can't only attribute value to positive feedback and not attribute value to negative. So you have to sort of go, maybe we did vomit out that design and we should all be fired. But it's like, so in those circumstances, you have to kind of go, I'm sorry, I can't listen to, I've got to do what I've got to do. And unless it's actual actionable feedback, I can't really take positive or negative response. Or
it needs to be, coming back to that, it needs to be 10 positives and 1 negative probably to actually be balanced. I think the biggest problem I have sometimes with feedback is, like, some feedback I'm excited about and some I'm not. And I think one of those things is, like, there's always an implied action to that feedback. And the feedback that makes me furious or that really hurts me is the one that's like, by giving me that feedback, you are basically implying that I need to do the same amount of work all over again, or kind of more or less start from scratch in order to please you now. Versus sometimes the feedback is like, I've got something to a point and I show it to someone and they're like, yeah, cool. And then I'm like, cool, I can go ahead. I can keep going. Like, you get that, like, you nailed it. You're like, brilliant. I've got, like, you're talking about the bike thing, like that I think that's sort of feedback that's actionable. It's like, oh, I gave you the thing that if you pedal faster, you go this much faster. And that's a very easy, nice loop to be in. And that's a good kind of praise. But in the same way, the criticism, but it's also with, like, the praise. It's when it's just like, you're a genius and what you've done is amazing. You can't do anything with that.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, it's just like uncomfortable because it's like, I'm just going to humble brag about sometimes getting called a genius. That's not my point here. I'm just saying.
Michael, do you get called a genius sometimes?
I've never been called a genius by anyone. But the point is, it's like, it's this completely, I can't do anything with it except maybe feed it into some really unhealthy part of me that is equal. There's no point doing that because you're just going to then get destroyed by the next piece of criticism that you encounter. If you absorb that sort of, like, people just, I don't know, do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing I can do with that information. Like, I write it on the bloody poster, maybe. I don't know. Like,
it's not. Yeah, there's not, and it's about it's in that form. It's like saying you've got blue eyes. There's nothing you can do. Yeah, I have. Thanks. Okay, it's an observation rather than a. I was listening to an episode of The Guilty Feminist this morning whilst on my bicycle riding around really fast, and Jessica Foster Q was talking about people who like people who come and watch a comedy show and instead of laughing say, very funny. It's like that's not actually. I was like, I don't. No.
that's nice, isn't it? Because that's again, like, the laugh is the kind of like, okay, I can keep doing that and try and get another one. But it's like I kind of want to know what someone liked about what I did. Like, and I often get people saying that they love something that I've done, but I'm like, I don't know what it is that you like about it. I don't know how to make more like that because, or even people talk about, like, I had feedback about the podcast, sort of complaining about it a little bit from one person, but it's like, I don't know which episode you listened to. Like, I don't know how to respond to this, so it's just going to stay in my inbox for weeks on end and I'm never going to get around to replying to it, kind of thing. Because it's like, you haven't given me enough information for this feedback to be actionable. which just makes it this kind of worthless thing. But I guess the person giving the feedback doesn't always have an intuition about what is going to be actionable, about what is something you're going to do anything about.
No, and it does involve a conversation, really, which is why anonymous, or, you know, even if it's not anonymous, but public feedback to which doesn't allow any sort of discussion is the worst kind, because you're like, well, these people are rubbish and this is really boring. Oh, what do you mean boring? You know, like, do we spend much time talking about ourselves? Do we not reference enough facts? Do we what's boring about it? Is it just not the topic you're interested in? Maybe you should listen to a different podcast. Like, you know, I don't know. Not that anybody would ever say we were boring. I listened to a very good podcast the other day that I enjoyed. That was half an hour. Two economists talking to each other, but it was very quick fire. But they were it's like, right, okay, and I almost felt like I needed to slow it down so I could take notes. Not that I was taking notes, I was like, hang on, what was that, rewind. But yeah, so it's a bit too fast for me. But anyway, they had lots to say in only half an hour, because apparently people like half an hour long podcasts. That's also feedback people get. Could it be shorter? Yeah. Which bitch do you not want? So yeah. But you know, if we had, what I'd really like you all to do is like put in loads of feedback on the way on anywhere, and then that would be a nice problem to have.
Would you like a jelly
Going back to the comedy thing, I still think there's a difference between presenting some new branding or a new website design to somebody, or a new product or whatever, and a piece of music. I think in the context of music, it's okay for somebody to not like it. In the same way, like, the question is, did they dance? Did they tap their feet?
Me.
No, but that's not what it means.
Robert said, if people love your music, they love you. That means that they hate me if they hate my music. I don't know if that's useful advice.
I don't know if either of those statements are true. My point is, frankly, that there's a difference between... There is a difference between creating music, between, telling jokes, being a stand-up comedian. You know, you want people to laugh. If you're making music, you want people to feel moved, surely, either to dance or to be still or to listen, whatever. But, you know, there's like actions that are associated that really, if you're touching people in their soul, then they may not be able to talk about it, and they may not need to, because they sat there and started crying reading something, or watching a painting, looking at a painting, or watching a movie. You know, like, their emotional response. Not everybody can talk about emotions, and certainly not everybody can give technical feedback. I sometimes talk about some music and they'll go, it doesn't sound right in my ears. I don't. I think it's possible to not like somebody's voice.
Yeah, and that's a sort of an obvious something that people can talk about. But like, the thing about people not giving you feedback, it is quite a, you know, it's always, I think people have a personal sort of reaction to music, and I think on one level it's like, you know, design things, you are trying to solve a specific problem. With music, that you're trying to solve the problem of keeping people dancing, maybe, but that's like a specific type of thing that maybe isn't always what you're trying to do. And also, it's like, it's quite rare to be able to check if it works. You have to sort of play your shows, and it has to go well, and people have to be in the right mood and all that stuff. But the problem with like not getting feedback on stuff like that, the exhausting thing about it is that you just, as a creator, you're just stay so scattergun about like the different things you're trying until you get a little bit of, and actually like off just something that you can do something with and go, okay, well, I'll make some more like that. Even if someone goes, I really like this song, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to make a couple more like that then. Because the rest of the time, you know, you're just trying dozens, hundreds of different things, and you sort of stick them out in the world and you just have no clue, like...
Yeah, but do you like your songs?
I like them, yeah.
But you know, it's like
But it's
no,
not.
I'm
No, but like I'm not some fucking saint that doesn't give a shit if someone likes what I do. I want people to like it. Like this is. I'm sorry. Like anyone that says that I'm just doing it for myself can just go and whatever.
do one.
Whatever.
Well, no, but I think the reason I asked was because
Yes,
I was thinking
yes.
about stand-up comics, and stand-up comics test their material.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they have shows where
There's
they
a
may
very-
or may not go well.
There's a tight
And they-
feedback loop for them.
That's very tight feedback. Do people laugh? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Right. Take that bit out. And they will also have material that works really well in one place, but not in another place.
Yeah.
I now know all sorts about stand-up comedy. I'm a professional now that I listen to the whatever it's called, The Guilty Feminist all the time. So. You know, but you've also said like doing more gigs gives you the opportunity to see people enjoying or bopping or not bopping. It's very hard when you're sticking things on the internet. People aren't going to make videos of themselves going, yes. It's like
And I guess that comes back to a fundamental kind of caution and fear of requesting feedback. I suppose a gig is basically asking for feedback about
it is really.
what you make. Like I've never actually thought about it like that. And like I am just like I find it very hard to request feedback on things. Just kind of put myself, because it's vulnerable, you're just completely exposed. You're just like,
Yeah.
and but it's like no risk, no reward. Like when it goes well, there's nothing like it. But there's always that chance that it's going to be just the worst moment of your life as well. I've had those as well, like from putting myself out there, making myself vulnerable like that. I've had the worst times. So.
Actually, to say out loud that you like a piece of music
God.
in this world as it stands today requires a degree of bravery.
Yeah, people's identities.
It's more
are
than
so-
anything else. Even a movie, if somebody goes, "Oh, I thought it was rubbish and I didn't like the the cinematography," you can go, "Well, I didn't like it." Or I loved it. I know it's a 4.4 on IMDb, but I was vegging out that night. And then you have these phrases like guilty pleasures and stuff that you can apply to music as well.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of learn those phrases because nobody wants to appear uncool to be listening
No.
to. You just remember LBI, how much abuse people got for like
when
liking the wrong
Spotify
tunes.
started telling you, or like was it Messenger when it started telling people what you were listening to? It's like I got like Dave Carter, Narcissist. I'm like, because I was listening to my album that I just finished, like probably a few times, because I like listening to my songs, and then because everyone could see now, it's like, and then you have to get into this cycle of I'm going into private listening mode because I want to listen to something a bit cheesy.
But I think if you extrapolate that sort of music, oh my God, I've got to. What I say I like says something about me and opens me up to criticism. I think that's the same thing that applies to people. I'm not sure about restaurant goers, but that sort of, I'm paying loads of money for this design work and I'm not sure I'm qualified to know if it's any good.
Yeah.
I do think it's on you as the designer to help somebody through that process, but it's not always easy. But you can't really account for people who don't want to be vulnerable themselves and say, I don't like it because it reminds me of something horrible that I don't like, or it makes me think of something, or.
And I've seen some really top designers just completely fail to defend what's good about what they've done. And it's just ended up getting horribly diluted. You see that over and over again. And I always sort of imagine that I can do a better job of defending the work, but then when I'm put in that situation, I just find myself like, there's only so far getting angry about something is going to get you, about someone not being able to understand. Like I can, because I think I'm better than some people at like articulating what makes something good, but it's just like it's just so hard.
Yeah, Marcus and I did some work for somebody recently, or so I introed, and she wanted a new logo, new brand identity basically, and Marcus sent through some. We had a little phone call with her, and then Marcus sent through some ideas. And I think because we know her, we thought we'd do it really well and quickly. And she just phoned me. She goes, "I'm really sorry, but I just don't like any of them." So it's like, you're allowed to not like it. That's okay. And she was like, and then she got this quite good analogy, which I think is as well about, which helps that whole establishing what you're trying to achieve. She's like, it's like when you want to buy you've got this idea in your head of a particular dress you want to buy for an event, and you go around all these shops looking for, and you see lots of great dresses, but until you find the one that matches this imaginary dress in your head that you can't describe, you just feel very unsatisfied. And I think there's a touch of that as well. People commission work without really having the ability to describe what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't apply that to, presenting dinner to your husband. My husband also cooks. It's an equal opportunities household. We all make mistakes, but the purple stew has gone down in history.
I did feel inspired watching RuPaul's Drag Race and seeing the
again?
effect. I know. Well, I haven't seen it. I've been watching. We finished it a while ago. But what did inspire me about that was seeing how people improved from the feed, even that, like, quite the harsh feedback to start with, but the ways people kind of like came out of themselves and learned how to be vulnerable and learn how to be better at what they do from that kind of weekly, or I don't know how quickly it is in real life, but from that feedback from the judges panel. And and it kind of made me want to find someone who could do that for the stuff I'm doing. I don't know if I've ever found that, but because it's always something I've avoided, and I suppose there's a bit of like, well, I don't know how much better I can do this anyway, and I don't really want to listen to most people's like judgment on these things. But seeing that like made me kind of want to seek it a bit more, and I think it's. Do you think it gets easier the more you do it, the more you ask for feedback, the more? Do you think you build up a skin? Because I just like this morning as part of my admin, I was like, right, I'm going to look at all the reviews, all my app reviews, all the podcast reviews. I'm just going to read them. And it was like, it just, even though they were fine, it just like emotionally, I found it like really intense and really horrible. And I just didn't want to look. And I just think, do you think like just if you keep doing it, it gets easier, or is it just going to be like that forever?
I think if you go to actual art school or design school type places, you do have to do formal crits, which I think is partly why Marcus is so good at giving a critique, actually. And I think it is a skill that you can learn both to receive that sort of constructive criticism and give it. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I personally think we all, like for me, speaking purely personally, for every aspect of my life, I feel always like I go through a phase and I something gets better. I get better at something. I learn something, and then there's this period where I'm feeling all confident, and then I as soon as I've got to that point, then I want to get better at, and it's like I go through phases where I'm very happy and calm and cool with who I am and what I am, and then I start questioning it again. And in those periods, I'm not very good at criticism. But when I'm feeling good about myself, then I can take it and I can have it out there, and I can enjoy it as feedback and what I want to do. Choosing what to do about it, but it all depends where,
Yeah, often like the trouble is that like when you've done, like when you've worked really, really, really hard on something and it's the best you know how to achieve, it's very hard to sort of imagine how anybody could give you any feedback that would change. It's just like, I feel like asking for feedback is asking for a ton of unpredictable amount of more work to do that I barely managed to find time to do this thing. But then like I bet that's probably just not. Maybe if I could visualize that there are people that could give me like a little note here and there that would help me find it a lot easier, then maybe that's the kind of goal here. Or,
I think there's two parts. I'm thinking of myself and a number of people that we work with. We all need to be told that what we've done is good and that it's liked.
Yeah.
We all want the electric bicycle experience.
Okay.
Give me feedback, but make it about me being even faster. And I think that in order to be creative and put your ideas in front of people, you are being vulnerable, you are showing something of your thinking, of how your mind works and how you work out problems, and that makes you vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's on the one side.
Positive feedback only, please.
But no, I
think there's some sense to that, but go on.
But I think that there's equally, I don't ever think that anything couldn't be better.
Yeah. No, and I always think what I've done could be better, but it's like conceiving of having the time to make it better is the difficult thing for me sometimes.
Yeah. I definitely live in a world where I'm comfortable with good enough for what.
Yeah.
So and I think when people go, oh, it could do this, you could do that. Yeah, it could, but not today, not now.
You know.
When do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? Are you free next week? Why don't you do it? So I think it's a bit of a, that's where I want electric bicycles for my feedback, and the agreement that my legs could always be stronger.
Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, come to grandpodcast.com. There's a subscribe button that you can click, or you can just do it in the app you're listening to this in. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
Find me at michaelforrestmusic.com, goodtohear.co.uk, and some other places. If you are really important, we've got a Patreon.
Sorry, I did it again.
I gave Ivanka the feedback of not popping the microphone with nose exhalations, which it's fine.
I'm working on it.
We're just it's a gradual mic technique. This is going to be a horrible recording because I've got all the windows open and all the fans going on my side. But anyway, if you're a big shot, patreon.com/grandpodcast. It's possible if you're important and you're super just special, big deal, you can give us some regular cash and help us support our activities. What else?
Or if you just want to give us a bit of money and help us pay the bills for the podcast, that would be really cool. What else? The thing that we really need is for people to find our podcast, and they can do that by you writing reviews and ratings, telling your friends, especially if your friends are very influential and influencers, please. If they have lots of followers, I mean, frankly, even if they tweeted, not sure about this podcast, other people might check it out.
Exactly.
They might like it. So yes, if you could take the time to do those kind of, and if write some 5-star reviews. I found the technique of taking people's phones and subscribing to the podcast for them works for me. So don't have great traction with my immediate family members, but they're just not podcast type people. So yes,
if you know us. And send us your address. Send us your address, because I'm going to do some mugs. I'm going to send some people some mugs.
This could be very expensive.
Yeah, it could be. Oh, we'll see. I don't know. They're nice mugs, but if you want to send me your address, hello@grandpodcast.com is the address. I've got a text from Sharon about evening plans in Italian. It's I'm up to 30 lessons into my Italian learning, and
you're fluent.
I did some whining. I had some fun whining dramatically in Italian yesterday. Perché non parla mio? I don't know, like this. And she was like, "You're putting the emphasis on all the wrong bit." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just having fun." But now this is my first all Italian text, and I don't know what it says. It's going to take me a few minutes to decode. So while I do that, I will wish the listeners goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.